Melanie, welcome to the Visionary Life podcast. I'm really excited to have you here because you and I were connected through a group that we were both part of, learning about human design and gene keys. And I had expressed in that group that I actually didn't know my birth time and nobody could figure it out. And because my main parent has passed away, there is no recollection. So you and I had a session. And quite honestly, you blew my mind. Your level of professionalism, your level of enthusiasm, your knowledge, your expertise. I just thought I need to know everything about business astrology, how it can help me and my business, how it can help my clients and my community. And I am just so excited to be sharing your story and also learning about how we as entrepreneurs can benefit from business astrology, which is what you offer. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I'd love to know first some quick rapid fire questions. Where did you grow up and where do you live now?
So I am from Baltimore, Maryland in the States, a very post-industrial town. I lived in Los Angeles for 3 years, moved out in 2020. That was an interesting experience. And I am back in Baltimore living with my partner because I love him. So I'm here again.
I love that. What initially sparked the move to Los Angeles and what did you think of your time there?
Yeah, it was 2020. Everybody was going crazy. I think in 2020 there was like fires going on in California. So I was like, I've always wanted to live somewhere else. I was turning 31 at the time. I was like, all right, it's either now or never. I'm over this place. And like because of the fires and the general chaos, I was like, I'll get a really good place for really good rent. And it was true. So I had a really great time out there. And I also wanted to improve the relationship with my dad, which I did as well. And I also wanted to normalize celebrity and affluence, which I did. And LA is cool. And a lot of it is illusion. And at the end of the day, I learned celebrities are just people and they're just trying to do their job. And actually, some of them are pretty cool.
That is so fascinating. I would love to just like dive deep on more of your experience there, but we'll save that for another episode. And yeah, you're right. LA, it seems almost like a facade sometimes. And I'm like,
It
I
can
want to
be.
get to like the true story. What's actually going on here? And I'm sure that is a little easier to pick up on when you actually live there and kind of
Mhm.
put down some roots there. So that's really, really cool. Do you remember what your first job was? And does it have anything to do with what you're up to today as a business astrologer?
Are you referring to life after college or like first job ever?
Well, either. I guess whatever comes to mind. If it's like your first job or first
Mhm.
real job, quote unquote.
My first job of semi-adulthood was when I was in college. I did academic advising for the younger students. I've always had a counseling background. I have a degree in psychology. And when I got out of college, I was like, you know what? At the time, it was very in vogue to get a master's degree for no reason. So I was like,
Yeah.
well, in the US, it was a thing. So I'm like, well, that's a horrible idea. It doesn't really make economic sense. And I haven't had any work in the field of social work. So I'll go do that and I'll see if I want to get a master's in it. So I was out here on the streets of Baltimore doing outreach for homeless people.
Mhm.
That was actually a really scary job, I'll be honest. It was probably the dirtiest job I've ever had. And it's really dangerous because you're working with people that you don't know what their mental health state is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I found social work to be not the best use of my skills.
Mhm.
And because I was in such a depressing atmosphere, my clients were very depressed, the work is depressing, I had to develop spirituality at the time. So I needed to develop these tools, which I'm sure you teach in your masterminds. So in order to thrive, I adopted these tools. And I did the whole thing where you're supposed to go to school, get straight A's. I did the college prep thing. My parents sent me to a very fancy college prep school. I did college. I was in the honors college. I am an honors scholar, if that means anything to people. Um, and I did the thing where she get a job, and then hopefully the job will pay for a master's degree or something. And it just was not working out. So, because I was in a state of not joy at the day job, I was like, okay, I got to go back to my roots here. What was I doing as a kid? What did I really want to be? And then I realized what you're kind of doing at 4 to 6 years old is kind of what you should be doing the rest of your
Mhm.
life. So I know people think it sounds cheesy sometimes, but that is the truth. So I've always have been into the esoteric. I've always been into occult knowledge. I've always been interested in mythology and astrology. And actually, for all my Christians that might be listening to this podcast, I grew up in the Greek Orthodox Church, and that is where I learned about Greek mythology. Because if anybody knows Greeks, they love to talk about themselves and their history. So does it make sense to learn about Greek mythology at Christian school? Well, whatever. Uh, so that was like a very long-term thing I had been studying with mythology and whatnot. And so by 2016, I had left the secure day job of social work. I did not even get paid bachelor pay. It was not worth my time. And I just kind of had this as a side hustle for a few years. And then I explored other jobs because I also had to work multiple jobs when I did social work. So then I managed boutiques for a long time. I worked with a higher end clientele, which is very different than working with the homeless. And actually kind of just weaved together my experience with working with beautiful textiles and beautiful things and high quality items. And I mixed it in actually with storytelling and the mythology portion. And then I was like, I like tarot, but I don't feel comfortable just being a tarot reader. And astrology kind of was that missing piece. I put it all together. So all of this quote unquote useless knowledge, as I was told when I was younger, is actually serving me now. Because ultimately, astrology is the study of archetypes, not personality types. And with astrology, the 12 zodiac signs are representing 12 archetypes that are within every single human being at varying levels. And that unique mix of levels of archetypes is what makes up your personality or how you respond and how you react to the world.
So fascinating. What I love about the story that you just shared is that it wasn't necessarily a linear journey. And I think sometimes we look at entrepreneurs or we look at people who are in corporate jobs and we're like, oh, like they've always just known what they wanted to do. And it must have just been this very like linear path that they followed and got promoted and everything was easy. But then there's journeys like yours and my own journey where it's like, I kind of started in this path and then something didn't feel right. So I went and worked random jobs to make ends meet. And then you start reflecting back on like, okay, what has my life taught me thus far? Where do I spend a lot of my free time? What books do I read? What YouTube videos do I watch? What were the hobbies I had as a 4 to 6-year-old? And you almost start to like peel back the layers and deprogram yourself because it's like, well, I was told I had to go to university. And I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do at 18. So I chose something weird like human resources. For me, that felt suffocating. And, I couldn't quite figure out, like, is there more to life? Am I allowed to look back at my hobbies as a kid or as a teenager and pivot? So did you ever have any hesitation in making these changes? Did you ever feel that pressure to just like stay in the job, get the master's and like do what your parents said? Or were you always a free spirit and just thought, I'm just going to rebel and go my own way?
Well, the joke is, I am a Libra sun, which means my birthday is in October, so I'm a Libra. And I joke with my friends, I'm like the worst Libra. I can be very argumentative. I can be very assertive, to the point where it's like, I'm not here to be people pleasing. I never have been that way.
Yep.
But there's other reasons for that, but we're not going to break it down in this episode. But the point is, I've always kind of been pretty independently minded. My dad is Mexican, so my other family members would be like, "Oh, your oldest daughter is very strong-willed," and my dad has just been very lax, and he's like, I'm not going to control her. I can't control her anyway." I was very mouthy as a kid, and it's mostly because by the time I got out of college, my mother had passed away when I was 19. It was very unexpected. I had a falling out with my dad. I didn't have any family actually in the middle of college, like just supporting me. Like I had like no one. I had to rely on my friends. My extended family was not there for me. So my attitude was like, okay, I'm the one taking out these student loans. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Like literally no one's helping me. So if anybody else's opinion at this point. And then when it came to master's degrees, and I don't know if your listeners experience this, it doesn't make economic sense in the US necessarily to get a master's degree when you've already maybe spent 20 to 60 grand in your undergrad school. And then why would I take out another 80 to 100 to get a master's? Like, I'm not even into math, guys. So if I can figure out the economics, it doesn't make sense. Why would I take out 100 grand to get a master's in social work, but I only get 10 grand more a year? So then maybe I make 35,000 a year. Like that doesn't literally makes no sense. So I've always kind of just been like, all right, I don't know what everyone else in the world around me is doing, but I'm gonna focus on me because I don't like the life they are living.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of been my guiding force. Like, is this person trying to give me advice actually living the life that I want?
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time they're not. God bless them. I got to move
Yeah.
on. You know?
Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's probably a lot of the work you do today in working with business owners and CEOs and entrepreneurs when they just feel like something's not working here, or I need a little bit of guidance, or seeking outside wisdom or inner wisdom, but I don't know who to turn to. So let's kind of first start with, how did you get into business astrology? I believe your mom or your grandma might have also been in
Mm-hmm.
this line of work. Could you give us a little bit of context on how you found yourself as somebody who practices astrology?
Yeah. So interestingly, I learned a lot more about my mother after she passed. I was like uncovering the pieces here. Also found out she was into Wicca back in the
Hmm.
70s. So it's an interesting time. 70s was an interesting time for spirituality. And my mom was always discouraging me actually from doing anything intuitive, astrology or tarot. She assumed it was not safe. So there is a mediumship ability on that side of the family for me,
Yeah.
seeing spirits, being very intuitive, um, naturally just knowing things and no one else knows. So that lineage has the gift, but they've been very afraid of it. I'm very much like, well, the 3D world's kind of lame. It's not really interesting. So we could probably spice it up a bit. So I think it's always helpful if someone is considering working with an astrologer or any kind of person that's relying on intuition. So some people have gone to professional psychics or professional tarot readers. They are great. I actually have friends like that. But those particular practitioners are relying on their intuition alone. So maybe they're not in the greatest mood, right? Maybe they're having a rough day. I think it can be a little challenging and draining to work with that kind of person. When you're working with an astrologer like me, astrology has been around for a few thousand years. So the structure is the same. So despite if I'm having a rough day, for example, I can still interpret a more objective way, than just relying on kind of the images I'm getting through my third eye.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, astrology is just like more cut and dry, more like these are the facts. Your birth chart is your roadmap. It is who you are. It's your soul's blueprint. So even if you don't like what you hear, which again, I'm not out here trying to make people feel bad, but sometimes it illuminates the things that we don't like to see. Um, you can still interpret it as this is a neutral thing.
Mm-hmm.
Take what you want, consume what resonates, spit out the bones. You can always come back to it later.
Absolutely. I'm curious, what are some of the signs or telltale moments in an entrepreneur's life or a CEO's business or workday? What are those signs that would prompt them to reach out to a business astrologer? What are they going through? What are they feeling on a daily basis that maybe they don't even know that your work exists? So I want to bring to light what they might be feeling that can be helped by the work that you do.
Yes. So most of my clients are CEOs and executives, very much focused in their zone of genius. They're doing this thing that they're really good at. So they might find someone like Elon Musk or Bezos as inspirational, but not necessarily aspirational. They're not necessarily
Yeah.
trying to be super, what's the term? Uh, they're not trying to be super weird and futuristic per se. It's more of like, I really found my gift. I really honed it. I'm really good at it, but I'm
Yes.
just feeling a little blah.
Yeah.
So some of my clients come to me and they're like, I can scale to a multi-million-dollar business, but they already have their finances handled. Their family's thriving. They're very happy. They're content, but they like also know there's this, what is the spiritual meaning behind scaling to this bigger business? Like, what am I really doing
Yeah.
this for? Money does not necessarily motivate them all the time anymore. They
Mm-hmm.
finally got the red Corvette, and they got everything they wanted.
Yep.
But for business astrology, it's also kind of it's a good tool to understand your own personal inner world and your personal psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And then the business astrology aspect is also, when is a good time to plan a product launch? When is a good time to acquire a business? There's a lot going on this month. Maybe March of 2020 is a horrible time to acquire a hospitality business or a short-term Airbnb rental business. Like, oh, not a good time,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a Venus retrograde going on. So Venus, the planet of love, beauty, art, and money, it looks like it's going backwards. Not a good time to sign contracts. Not a good time to acquire business. It can also be a good tool to understand. Well, let's see. I started this business when I was 24. I'm 30 now. I'm feeling a certain kind of way. Well, it's because you're in the middle of your Saturn return. So that means the planet of responsibility, Saturn, and overcoming obstacles is in the same exact spot it was when you were born. So if you're living a life that is in alignment with what you should be doing, it's going to be some challenging times, but you're going to be overcoming it. If you're totally unaware, it's just going to punch you in the face. It's just not a good time. Again, it comes around again every 30 years. So by the time an entrepreneur is 60, maybe like, oh, I've made all these amazing businesses. I've had all of this success, but now I don't know, I'm feeling a little bit empty. Like, have I accomplished actually everything I set out to do? So it's a good neutral structure to it's an evaluation tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As business owners, and I'm always chatting with my community of visionaries, oftentimes the topic of the full moon and Mercury retrograde come up in conversation. And I myself have, for the past few years, found that I'm a little bit confused even on why that affects energy and outcomes. And it seems like we almost throw those terms around. And sometimes I'm like, are we just like blaming what's going on? I'm curious, can you give any
Right.
insight into like, what is the meaning of the full moon and what's going on? And then same with Mercury retrograde. We hear this all the time, but could you give us some insight into what that actually might mean and how it could impact your outcomes as a visionary or as an executive or CEO?
Right. So when it comes to the moons in general, there's a new moon and a full moon happens twice a month, right? So
Yep.
you get a full moon once a month and a new moon once a month. So basically, the full moon is the moon, of course, is fully illuminated. And if the moons affect the tides of the water, they're definitely going to affect humans because we are, 70% water. Can confirm when I did social work and I have friends that are ER nurses, when there's a full moon, there's more activity going on in the ER. There's more insanity.
That's
My
crazy.
clients, when I did social work, my clients always seem to have a meltdown. And every time I looked it up, always a full moon. So again, I don't think it's like an excuse to be like, oh, I'm insane. It's the full
Yeah.
moon.
Yeah.
Because the moon in Spanish is luna. Lunacy is the thing that happens.
Yeah.
Werewolves in mythology come out in the full moon.
Yeah.
So I think of it as the moon represents your innermost self in astrology. It's fully illuminated. Maybe all your biggest insecurities and vulnerabilities, there's a spotlight on them. So I think sometimes people can act a little out of their everyday character.
Yeah.
The new moon is looking like the sky is all black. The moon is not out, right? I guess you could say it almost looks black. You can't see, it's not illuminated. So it's a good time to set intentions, whereas the full moon is a good time to release. So if you're going to have a crazy meltdown, do it during the full moon. There's a concept called swamping. Scream and cry for about 30 minutes, yell it out, and then end it on a positive note. Have that container for the crazy, and then we move on. And then when it comes to Mercury retrograde, we have Mercury, the planet of communication, broadcasting, messaging, storytelling, social media. Also, salesmanship. So Mercury is the ruler of Gemini. Gemini, you could associate with Hermes in mythology. He's a messenger of the gods flitting about. So you have a very active planet just run around, looking like it's going backwards in its rotation. But it only looks like that because we're on Earth. So it's so far ahead, it looks like it's going backwards.
Yep.
So it's the astronomical interpretation of Mercury retrograde. But if you have this planet of communication and wittiness and quick thinking, looking like it's going backwards, it's slowing down. So it's like everything comes to a halt. Usually your technology craps out on you because Mercury is a metal planet. Sometimes you can't speak properly. So at the time of this recording, we are in a Mercury retrograde. It started on the 23rd of August, going through the 15th of September. So yeah, you could find like, oh man, like maybe you're dropping the balls or you're like missing appointments or maybe your Zoom keeps knocking you off. That's happened to me.
Yeah.
So it's not so much like, also with Mercury retrograde, it's not a good time to sign contracts because you don't really have all the information you need. There could be miscommunications. So again, with all this activity I just explained, this is not an excuse to be like, oh, Mercury retrograde, I'll just hold off on my launch or something. Or, oh, I can't do anything. I'm paralyzed. It's Mercury retrograde.
Yeah.
No, we got to live, right? So the point of incarnating on this planet is to deal with the challenges that Saturn, the planet of responsibility, doles out to us. And then we overcome it by our own grit, or resiliency or resourcefulness. And actually overcoming the challenges is part of the game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is so interesting. So do you have a calendar that say charts out all the new moons, full moons, when Mercury is in retrograde, and you almost plan your business around those times? Do you recommend that people pay attention and kind of just be in tune to what's happening astrologically so that we know when to make these big decisions, how to structure our business, maybe when to be in like, an on season where you're signing all the contracts, closing deals, and then when to be in a season of like, hey, I'm just going to let things flow right now, just suss out the environment. How do you run your business?
Yes. So I view the new and full moons as a good time for every entrepreneur just to set intentions and release. Set intentions, reevaluate. So that's always good to do twice a month, just in general. So every 2 weeks. When it comes to planning out your year, there's a lot that goes into it. So, for example, we're about to move into Libra season at the time of this recording. Libra, represented as the artist and lover, the people pleaser in the business zodiac, the people person, flitting about, very social, very extroverted season. But say you have a Libra moon, so maybe you're a little bit more. You're not as outgoing during that season because you just need to have some time to yourself. You're not flitting about as much. So I don't know. There's like nuances in every chart. I would say if anybody is interested in understanding the moons and when they are happening, and you don't want to have to rely on a website to tell you, there is a brand I like. It's called Magic of Eye, and it is a beautiful planner, and it's very thick, and it explains all the astrological transits ever throughout a year. So it's always good to have. And it's intended for people that are beginning astrologers to professionals. When it comes to planning out the year, though, say you're getting ready for your 2024 planning, always good to understand when the Mercury retrogrades are happening throughout the year, just so you can be aware of them. And then you give yourself extra space if you decide that's a good time for a launch or something. It's also a good idea to check out, what's happening with Venus and Jupiter. So Venus, the planet of love, beauty, art, and money, and Jupiter, the planet of good luck, abundance, and opportunity. What's going on with them? Are they retrograde or are they going direct? Like, what are the general dates? Just always good to have kind of an overview. And I think of it as kind of like an overlay. And when you have like quarters 1 through 4 laid out, like just see what's going on. And then maybe you can plan around it. And you can see what might be a good day. There's also planetary days as well. So each day of the week is ruled by a different planet. So it's always good to kind of plan your work week around it,
It's so fascinating. I love listening to you talk about all of this because I think that so often when we start our business, we just expect that, okay, I just need to put my head down, work hard, basically follow the blueprint or the template of like, set this up and do your marketing and show up on social media. But there's no consideration until we do our own deep dive into this realm of alternative ways to run your business or just considerations. And we start realizing like, oh, for example, I'm a woman and maybe I want to run my business according to my menstrual cycle, or, there's a lot going on with the planets and there's a lot inside of my human design. And almost on this journey of entrepreneurship, it's like the more you're ready to uncover about yourself and the world and the way we interact with other humans, the easier it is to start building a business that feels like it's in flow. Would you agree with that? Like, have you been on this self-exploration journey too as an entrepreneur?
Yes. Self-exploration, self-development leads to self-mastery. And once you have most of that handled, you can handle anything, actually. I think a lot of the traditional business books written by men, I think there's very good gems in there. But as a woman, it's very important to understand what kind of rising sign are you? So the rising or ascendant sign is representing the energy you're naturally giving off. It also reveals what you look like. So with you, when we did your retrification, we discerned that you are Cancer rising. So very much ruled by the moon. You're a woman, very feminine. So maybe when you're at the height of your period, it's not the best time to be like running around doing everything or having a bunch of launches, boom, boom, boom. So again, good to know when that's all happening. Maybe another woman might have an Aries rising. Aries is the divine masculine. archetype of the zodiac, very much action taking, go getting. Maybe that kind of woman just has a lot of masculine energy, which is fine. And she really thrives on just like running around.
Yeah.
But maybe at some point of the year, everybody has a winter, regardless of whatever their placements are. So everybody has a winter time. So maybe that Aries rising woman, maybe summertime is a dead time for her because depending on whatever else is going on her chart, it's a time that she must relax and unplug. And maybe she's really thrives powering through the fall and winter seasons, you know? So
yeah, it gives us such permission to run our business in ways that actually serve us rather than ways that burn us out, make us resentful, make us hate this whole world of entrepreneurship. And it's so interesting because, so I do a lot of marketing strategy with clients, and a lot of clients will come to me and they're like, okay, Kelsey, just give me the strategy. Tell me exactly what to do. And then they implement it all, and they're not getting results or not the results that they hoped for. And I can just tell that there's so much they need to uncover in who they are. They've been avoiding their intuition. They make decisions and they look to me and say, well, you're the expert. You tell me what to do. And I'm like, but there's something in there that like, I need you to tap in and like, know who you are, because your personal development is directly going to correlate with the growth of your business. But it's really hard sometimes to explain that to someone, that this is not just a journey of professional development, like on the track of like, just learn social media, learn Google marketing, learn how to run ads and you'll be fine. I'm like, I think there's this whole other world you need to explore. And it's, I don't know if you call it like balancing the masculine and feminine or yin and yang, or, you know, I'm sure there's lots of anecdotes, but it's like, we can't just be in strategy all the time. That doesn't work for most people. And that's where I think working with professionals like yourself is so valuable, because you peel back the layers and you go, oh, like I've known this all along, or now this all makes sense. And I have permission to run my business in a way that actually serves who I am and my biology as an individual. So it's really, really fascinating.
Yeah, and astrology can be used for that. I have a PR strategy for busy CEOs experience. And, you know, what is the best use of your time? What's the placements, right? So, for example, I'm a Gemini rising. I give off the energy as a very extroverted person, very talkative, right? It's only because I'm really talking about things that interest me and I have a lot of interest.
Yeah.
Gemini is very multifaceted. Whereas someone else might be a Sagittarius rising. So Gemini and Sagittarius always across from each other. Gemini, the merchant and the messenger, versus Sagittarius, the traveling philosopher, very much focused on this one topic. Like he's doing this one thing that he's really diving into. The scholar, actually, you could say. So for someone like me, batch content creation is not a good time. Like I hate it. I hate doing it. I feel gross. For someone else that might have very strong Sagittarius placements, for example, maybe batch content creation is the best. They lock themselves in the room, they record a bunch of videos, they're getting it done, and they really thrive off of that. And they get it done all at once and they go about their lives. Just telling someone like that, right when you're inspired, get up in the morning and do your morning pages. Like that kind of person is going to be like, oh, that's horrible. So it's always good to see like, what is your natural energy? Like, what is your makeup? And like, what is aligned for you? Versus kind of trying on all these strategies and you don't know which one's the best. And your friend so-and-so did really good doing Facebook ads, but they're not working out for you.
Yes.
You gotta, what is your personal path, you know?
I love this. So you have a package that's actually called PR strategy for entrepreneurs, and it incorporates business astrology and like birth chart stuff, and shows you what type of marketing and exposure you should lean into that aligns with who you are. Is that correct?
Exactly. So, you know, I've worked with some CEOs and they're very shy, right? But maybe they have a Leo moon. So they actually do really well on stage if they know what they're talking about. So great. In-person speaking is going to be great for you. Podcasting, not so much, because it's only the voice, you know. Other people, they don't like talking, it stresses them out, but they write really well. So it's like, okay, well, let's get you connected to Forbes, or maybe you could be a contributor or something. What's the best use of your time? Because I don't want entrepreneurs or CEOs coming to me like doing one more thing that doesn't yield results, you know? So like, what is the best use of your time?
Absolutely. So for somebody who's totally new to this topic, they've never worked with a business astrologer before, but they're kind of listening to this going, okay, like I want to learn more about who I am and what my makeup is. What would you say is like the first step for them Is there something they should look at? Should they go straight to hiring you? I'm curious for the person who's already feeling that spark, like this is for me. What's their next course of action if they have no idea where to begin?
Yes. So for that kind of person, if they don't know the birth time, I'll do a shout out as well. Sometimes you just don't really know your birth time. The state you're born in doesn't record it, or maybe you're from a country where they just don't record birth times. Just come out to me, message me, and we'll figure it out. I'll just do that for free because that takes some time.
Yep.
For those that do know the birth time, they know where they were born, they got their birth certificate, they're not afraid to look at it. I've had some clients that are afraid to look at their birth certificate for some reason. I don't know why.
So weird. I guess like it's very revealing, right? Like that's
Yes.
your first day on earth. I don't know. Maybe there's, a little bit of trauma there.
Yeah. If the person wants to work with me is the person's like, I got to get things done. I'm going to see myself and it's going to be empowering. And even if it isn't comfortable, we're going to work through it. Like I have the counseling skills to help you out. So if someone is interested in working with me, I do have a divine assignment reading. It's 90 minutes long. So that is intended to figure out like, what are you really here for? What's the purpose? And what are practical strategies to get it done? So within that reading, it's like, what's your sun sign, the core archetype that you're here to embody? What's your moon, your innermost self? How can we create some emotional safety for you? What's your rising sign? How do people perceive you one-on-one? And what entrepreneurs need to know, especially if they're doing online promotion of any sort, what is their midheaven? So it's the middle of the heavens on the chart, and it's considered, it's associated with the 10th house, which is the area of life associated with your career and your legacy and your life's work. And it is how the public perceives you and your online persona. So if you're out here trying to brand yourself, I guess you could say, from your sun sign or your rising, you're not necessarily connecting with the people that you're meant to serve. With the midheaven, what you come across as when people just first come across from you is different than when they finally get to know you. You know what I mean? So you don't want to be bearing your soul out here on the rising side with people that just came across your LinkedIn, for example. So
what would be an example of, so if you were to like look at someone's midheaven, you're saying that's how the public perceives you. Can you share an example of like what that would say and how I would utilize that information?
Yeah. Understand the midheaven also helps you do a client audit when it comes to business astrology. Sometimes we work with the people that we think we should, or we've always kind of worked with them, but maybe it's like too much of a battle. So actually knowing the midheaven as well and the sign that it is in reveals sleeper markets actually that you might have not considered before. So
wow. So it could help us discover untapped opportunities in our businesses.
Yeah.
So interesting.
So for me, for example, I am a Gemini rising. I come off as very extroverted and people think I'm like, oh man, this girl likes to party. I don't know why people think that. It's not who I am at all. Just because I can be very talkative. I'm Greek. So I don't know. Maybe it just rubs off. But when it comes to the midheaven, I'm a Pisces midheaven. Pisces is the Jesus Christ figure, I guess you could say, of the zodiac. Very much focused on all the other signs. It's associated with the 12th house, the 12th sign, the most mature, consuming everything, trying to have this like all-encompassing compassion and forgiveness, very artistic and very between the physical realm and the spiritual realm. So no matter what job I've had, no matter what my LinkedIn headline says, no matter what business cards I've had say is my job, people are like, what do you do though? So mysterious. Like, but are you, okay, you're an astrologer, but like, what else do you do? So it's not so much that people are misunderstanding me or I'm not communicating what I'm doing. It's more of like, okay, I am a business astrologer, but what else can we kind of weave into the experience of working together? Is there some area of life that you've been kind of avoiding? Can we like work through that? Maybe we could add some artistic expression here since Pisces is artistic. Pisces also rules music and the creative arts. So if you're working with me, how can we show up in a way that is fun and creative for you? How can we actually Pisces also rules spirituality. So I help people with their spiritual development as well. So how can you make showing up online a spiritual practice versus something you just got to get done?
I love that. Oh my God. So much to explore here. So before we wrap up, I am curious, We have a lot of people who are building holistic businesses that listen to the
Nice.
podcast. There are a lot of nutritionists, naturopathic doctors, birth doulas, people who are starting as coaches in the space. I am curious, based on your own journey thus far of building a business in this industry, what is some advice that you could share forward to somebody who's in the early stages? They still don't have a lot of clients and they're probably wavering with like, can I actually do this? Is this possible for me? Or am I going to have to go back to my corporate job? Based on your own experience, what would you share with them?
I'd say for those more holistic practitioners, maybe the question to ask yourself is, are you ready to lead a movement? So
Wow.
that's a big thing. You got to commit to a movement. It's not so much like being obnoxious and like being out there and making
Oh,
yourself vulnerable when you're not really ready to. Like, oh, we don't do that. But it's more of like you're already bucking the status quo by being an entrepreneur, and you're already doing it if you're trying to be holistic when it comes to medical care, which can be
yep.
very triggering for people in the
Oh,
Western
yeah.
world.
Yep.
So do you have practices generally that helps you build the inner strength and the resilience to deal with people that might be triggered and harass you? Like that does happen. But it's not so much like can you run around with like your fist up? It's more of, do you have the tools in place to develop that emotional safety first within yourself first? And then are you ready to step in and lead a movement? That's a really big overarching question I'd ask myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then are you comfortable being the face of your business because you're building a personal brand, whether you like it or not? So with that, how can you again cultivate that emotional safety? Do you know yourself as well? Especially if you're like a birth doula, that's hardcore. Like,
Yep.
you're helping someone else birth a baby. Like that's a really big deal. So I would imagine they're comfortable with the physical experience, right? But are they willing to be vulnerable with somebody when they are vulnerable? You know what I mean? I guess it comes back to my social work training and being a counselor
Yep.
and having like being a therapy adjacent. It's like, do you have the wherewithal within yourself to step
Mm-hmm.
into that? If you were to utilize astrology, I would say, are you at least familiar with your sun sign, your outermost self, your moon sign, your innermost self, and your rising sign, the energy that you naturally emit? And as long as actually, I think if you know those three things, you can really build from there. So at least you know yourself. You got that self mastery down.
Mm-hmm. I feel like this is almost just like an essential thing for early stage business owners, entrepreneurs, executives
Right.
to learn about. And I would highly suggest they go check out your work. And if they've
Thank you.
never worked with someone like you, reach out and contact Melanie. She's absolutely amazing. I've done a session with her and it completely
Mm.
blew my mind. So, Melanie, where are the best places for people to connect with you? I know you have a special offer for anyone listening to the podcast. So, share with us how we can get in touch.
Yeah. So anyone can connect with me. I'm on Instagram at Melanie_Marisol. So that's Marisol. You can also find me at melaниemarisol.com. I have all of my offers listed there. And I'm also available on LinkedIn. If you search me, I'll show up. I'm one of the only Melanie Marisols in this world, as far as I'm aware.
Kind of cool.
Yeah, thank you. Additionally, anybody who's listening, if you book a reading from listening to this podcast, you do get 15 extra minutes with me. So highly recommend. And that goes for any of my one-off readings. So that includes my divine assignment reading. I also have aligned abundance reading as well, which is more focused on how can we stack some cash? What areas of life are good for you to channel abundance and other money? So if you book a reading through listening to this podcast, you get 15 extra minutes.
Amazing. We will link all of your locations in the show notes and share that again with all of our listeners. And we really, really appreciate you sharing with us your story, not only of how you started your business, but really just the power of tapping into business astrology to get to that next level in all of our entrepreneurial journeys. So thank you so much, Melanie, and we wish you all of the best.
Thank you.